to share my screen right now, so you should see it. And I'm going to be presenting, but it's going to be both me and Katya who's going to be talking. We're going to alternate and pass the microphone to each other. And for today's webinar, and we have an agenda, we're going to be talking about product leadership, obviously, and it has a few main sections. So the introduction, where we're going to explain about ourselves and the speakers and talk about the structure. We're going to talk about product management and product leadership. How do you understand the difference between them? And we would like to ask you a few questions, how you understand the difference and what are the skills necessary for each of the roles. So it's always different between different people. So we'd like to ask you, so we're going to be some questions in the chat. And if you don't mind, please mute yourself. We will give you an opportunity to talk and ask questions a bit later. Then we have the complexity framework, which is the main topic of the talk today. That will understanding it will help you transition to product leadership, or at least get a good understanding of how leadership works in product space. And of course, in the end, the classical Q&A time. All right, with that, let's continue to the intro. And we'll start from the talking a little bit about ourselves. So I'll go first. My name is Daniil. I've been working in the product space for the last 10 years or so, leading and managing different teams in startups and scale-ups of different size, from 10 people to 2,000 people. Currently, I work at Tier as a head of product, where I lead several product teams focusing on the growth areas. So everything that has to do with activation or acquisition, customer retention, subscriptions, referrals, engagement, more of activity from the customers, that's connected to growth, and that's with my teams. Before that, I was working in fintech for several years, also doing product strategy and product leadership with product managers. And this is my, let's say, primary job, what I do daily, full time. On top of that, I am quite active in the product community. So I last year produced a podcast with 10 episodes where I did interviews from the leaders in the industry. It's available online, currently on hold. I'll see if I will resume it for the second season. I also frequently speak at conferences and meetups like B-DoSE today, or in the Product Management Festival in Zurich, and also in other different meetups online and sometimes offline. They're starting to come back to life, which is an amazing experience to have people in the room. And together with Katya, we developed an educational course for product managers. So what we are going to share today is a part of the course, and it's a preview, let's say, of the first chapter, which is about product leadership, of course. So me and Katya decided, we created it, and we have our first cohort currently ongoing. We actually have a session tomorrow, and we're going to be looking for signups for the next cohort in the end of the, or in the middle of the summer. So we'll tell you a little bit more about it closer to the end of the webinar. So I'm very happy to meet you all. It looks like it's a very nice, small but active and fun community. So it's great to be here. I'll share my LinkedIn details in the end, so you can also connect with me and we can stay in touch. And Katya, over to you right now for your introduction.
Thank you, Daniil. My name is Katya. On LinkedIn or even on my website, I go by Katerina, my full name. But in more casual, fun environment like this lively community, I usually go by Katya. And I've been in product for more than 10 years and really just jumped throughout, like across B2B, B2C, startups, big enterprises. And one of my sweet spots for really feeling comfortable and confident in product management was really kind of working on B2B and enterprise level products. In the last couple of years, well, maybe we can say started in 2019, I kind of branched off, and together with my full-time occupation as a product leader, I started also coaching, because I recognized how much development of products and growth of product. And to me, the transition felt really natural. So last year, at about the same time, I transitioned into a full-time coaching, where I work with emerging or aspiring product leaders, but also product leaders who just stepped into these shoes to become the best that they can be, become the best product leaders that they're meant to be. And the interesting story on how Daniil and I met, he mentioned about podcasts, and that's actually was how we met and how the course, or like our collaboration, really emerged. Is he invited me to speak at his podcast, and what was interesting, sometimes, at least I feel this in product management, and I wonder if you can also resonate. Sometimes you meet another professional in your field, and you just, it's almost like, the spark from the first sight, right? You're like, oh my God, you're on the same page and you're aligned, and our philosophies about leadership and people development too. So there was like so much to talk about that it kind of felt natural to keep discussing and exploring the concept of leadership in product management, just because we felt like it's a sweet spot for both of us. We've been there, we went through the transition. And the collaboration emerged into building a course that I feel very proud of. We recently launched our first cohort, almost in the middle of that. And that's something we're going to talk also briefly about today, to give you a little bit of a sneak peek, but also to talk about the framework that we've developed that I have a feeling might even help pretty much those of you in tech fields, either you're a project manager or agile coach, to even think about leadership from a different perspective, maybe even just detaching it from product, but thinking about leadership. And with that, I think, I've mentioned to a couple of you who were, I've had a really good conversation in the breakout room. I currently live in Costa Rica, so for me, it's still kind of early morning, and I feel still pretty energetic. And I look forward to exploring more of this leadership framework with all of you in the next hour. Daniil, to you.
Thank you, Katya. So as Katya said, both of us are coaches. We're coaching PMs individually and in groups. And we have a small giveaway, a surprise for you as a thank you for joining this session. We're going to raffle at the end 2 coaching sessions, between one with Katya, one with me, for 30 minutes. So if you stay until the very end, you will learn how to participate, and 2 of those participants will get a free coaching session as a thank you from us for sticking with us until the very end. And with that, let's finish the first part of the presentation and go to the product stuff. So PM and the product leader. And if you take a look at product managers, and maybe some of you are all product managers, by the way, if you're a product person, can you maybe raise your hand or send a plus sign in the chat so we know how many of you are actually product? It would be interesting to learn. While you do that, we'll continue and talk about the product management first. So product managers are really doing a lot of work on the ground, and they focus on the depth that is around them. The good metaphor is like when you're swimming, you are a diver and with a scuba suit, and you see everything that is under the water. You see all the fishes, you see the depth, and you see maybe sharks, or you see crabs, and maybe you see other divers, and you really can feel the water with your hands. You're inside of everything. And you definitely work a lot on the questions of who is doing what in terms of teams and how to work with stakeholders. What is in the progress right now? What's cooking? What do you have in the discovery on delivery of your team, and when stuff should happen? So a big part of product management is, of course, leading projects, and they have timelines and milestones and goals. So all those things as roadmaps and strategy, they're also there. And product managers are really inside of a lot of things, in the middle of things. They usually have short time to onboard themselves, and lots of stuff are happening. You're talking to a lot of people, and that's the reality of product management. And we would like to ask you the first question and to see what you think about product management. Doesn't matter if you are a PM yourself or you just work with PMs. So what are the most important skills or qualities from your perspective that are necessary for product managers to work efficiently? And you can type it in the chat and we'll see your answer there. Or if you want to speak, just unmute yourself, or like raise a hand and unmute yourself after that, and talk to us with voice. It would be interesting to get your perspective. So we have already a few answers. I'm going to start reading them out loud. So we have endless learning. It's definitely a big driver. Prioritization, communication, prioritization again. Customer focus, yes, definitely. It's so interesting that we've been doing this webinar for maybe 5 or 6 times this year already, and nobody's answering like writing good Jira tickets. Like that's definitely not a skill that makes a good product manager. No matter how many people talk about being good with agile, you see communication, prioritization, vision, time management, data, openness, all of those definitely help product managers be successful. So thank you so much for your contribution. And let's move to the leadership part. So product leaders are slightly different. They don't work that much close with the product itself. They usually work on different things. And if we continue this metaphor of being in the water or a scuba diver, the product leader is usually a person who is above the water. And they have a very big view of 360, what is happening around them. And usually you can see much further away in the air than compared to the water. So they see some islands maybe, and ships and rafts and other people. Maybe they can see seagulls circling some area, and they see the movement, they can feel the air, they can smell it, and like they see where is it blowing, how hard it is, they can see the sunlight and the sunshine, or maybe they can see the clouds. So they have a very big top level overview of things, and they focus on the width, and they have much bigger reach when they work as product leaders. And usually the areas that they focus their attention on are the process part, like how are we doing things, the ways of working, the framework, the strategy itself. Why are we actually doing what we are doing, compared to product managers that need to decide like what we are doing and when. Those product leaders often ask the question like why, where is it leading, what is the big vision, what are the company goals and KPIs, for whom are we doing that, who is the end user, and how does it affect our business in general or investors. And also the bigger questions. And of course PMs also ask those questions. It's not like limited, there is no strict line on the sand that says like this is what you do, this is what you don't do. Of course we all think about the vision and the PM level as well, but product leaders focus much more extensively on this. And the same question as we had before, what are the most important skills that you think and the qualities that are necessary for product leaders? And let's see, again, you can post it in the chat, or if you want to talk, please raise your hand and we'll hear you. And the vision and strategy, of course, are very easy answers because I mentioned it and they're on the slides. Let's see what other skills and qualities you will come up with. For now, it doesn't really count. Okay, team leadership, stakeholder management, market development and market opportunities. Okay, listening. Focusing on business outcomes. Okay, SWOT analysis, strategic impact, and alignment between customer needs and company goals. Okay, connecting the dots and bringing things together, definitely. Interesting. Thank you for your answers. As you can see, they're quite different from product management level between product leaders, and it's a little bit more, let's say, on the different lever of impact. It's more on the, let's say, like leadership, vision and strategy, and the impact on the business, while product managers are more about maybe alignment and prioritization and communication and like data, things that are, as I said, the depth of things, like what's in the water. And so we talked about product management, product leadership. I think there is no one right answer, and depending on the company and the setup and the stage of the maturity stage, the responsibilities and requirements differ. But we, together with Katya, came up with a pretty much standard framework that can explain what are the main focus areas and how the product leader can structure their work day in, day out, or how does an average week look for a product leader when you no longer work with a product, you don't have a lot of design work or tech work or A/B experimentation. What actually should you be doing? And we call this a complexity framework. So Katya will introduce us to the framework and explain a few cases. So Katya, you with us?
Yep, thank you.
Okay, let me know when I need to click.
Yep, let's go to the next one. Cool. So with the complexities framework, right, something that, you know, a lot of you mentioned that, you know, you need to in your answers, you need to, as a product leader, you need to see market development and have stakeholder management, also have business outcomes. Those are really spot on. And I'm also curious, as we going to be going through this complexities framework, if you could also see how that potentially might be even applied to, your current role, even if you like in project or in agile coaching. Because from my experience, the last company I've worked at, leading a remote team of PMs, we had an agile coach who I was partnering up on a daily basis. So that person really helped me to kind of see the team from the bigger perspective, and for me as a leader to stay above the water, because one of the aspects of leadership, what an analogy that Daniil brought up, right, is staying above the water so that you know what it means to be under, what the groundwork needs to be done. But it's actually kind of challenging for a product leader, especially a new product leader, to constantly stay above the water. So for me, at least in my experience, the agile coach that I was partnering up with was really helping to stay above the water and focus on reducing complexities. And we can move on to the next slide, where, as with the time, you've probably seen it in your career if you work in tech and startup, any big organization, there's kind of natural progression where the more time passes, the more learnings there is. You enter maybe new markets, maybe your strategy changes, your vision pivots for some reason, right? Like during the pandemic, I feel like quite a few companies had to re-envision themselves. So there was certainly a time of a heavy complexity that was really escalating at a very fast pace. So with the time as we enter those new markets and change or pivot our vision, the complexity grows, and it grows really at all different levels. So we thought that the way to approach to leadership, and of course, the soft skills and all the hard skills are very important, but based on our experience, we realized that really if a product leader focuses on one area well, that should be really reducing the complexity. And with the next slide, we will show you that that's really what our framework is really all about, is how do you reduce complexities? And we can talk about many different levels of complexities. Again, if you work on project or the agile coach or any other capacity in tech, you probably deal with a stakeholder, so that's going to feel very familiar to you. So stakeholder is definitely a very big complexity for product managers, for a product leader. Again, as you enter new markets, the number of PMs and other employees is rapidly growing. You perhaps having more stakeholders to work with. Then there is a knowledge complexity, right? Again, with the time, you have more knowledge. You need to do something with that. If you don't, then it gets stuck in people's heads, or just somewhere randomly on people's computers. There is a complexity that, again, if you're in an early stage startup and suddenly you're experiencing this rapid growth, well, your team is going to grow tremendously, and you might feel like there is either too many people that kind of randomly assigned, or you're going to feel like I'm still lacking the most important resources. There is obviously scope, delivery. I think a lot of some product, like this is not my favorite part of complexity, but we have as product managers, we have to deal with the delivery and execution. You can't escape that, especially if you are in your early stage of career. There is also investors if you work for small startups. There's a time for merger and acquisition and many more complexities. But today, what we're going to talk about is really three key areas: stakeholder, knowledge, and the team. And we're going to start with the first one, with the stakeholders, which I hope will feel familiar because you probably will work already with stakeholders, even if you're not in the product complexities. In a product world. So the way it might feel, or we like to talk about it as a symptoms on the next slide, is, so as the organization grows, it goes through one stage to another. If you have complexity, it's gonna feel that you feel like you need to manage people, or you need to manage stakeholders. And from my perspective, every time I felt in my career like I have to manage stakeholders, it meant that, I'm probably not building a relationship with them. I'm probably doing something that I shouldn't be doing, because it really felt like all of them want different things and I can't understand what are their priorities. There is also a sense of kind of very unclear decision making, right? So when you try to understand, if you, let's say, a new team member and you enter the team, you try to understand how does the decision making work at this level of stakeholders, and you can't find the logs. You can't understand who makes decisions, how they've been made, what is the history, what are the logs. So it feels pretty chaotic from this point of view. There's also an emphasis on keep pushing the features. So you in a way becoming just, feature factory. No product managers like to work in an environment where you're serving stakeholders only who are constantly coming up for you with the new features, not the customer outcomes that ideally we would like, but features, and you really become, you start working for them, you become a feature factory. There is also a lack of trust in the team. I've certainly experienced that myself in almost all of the companies that I worked at, and that mistrust of the product team, it comes with a price. It comes with product managers needing to work or wanting to work harder. But the question is really not to work harder, but to introduce more transparency and to understand how do you actually make decisions. And so before I'll uncover some of the ways to reduce that complexity, we wanted to ask you a question. How would you reduce a stakeholder complexity if you were a product manager? Or how do you see product managers in your team? Or if you are product managers, how do you see them reducing stakeholder complexity? Maybe you're already doing it in your project or agile capacity or any other tech capacity that you do. And you can also share with us, just step in, unmute yourself, or you can share a few things in the chat. There is no right or wrong. It's all really, it's all really exploration. And while we're waiting for a couple responses, okay, so we have stakeholder matrix according to communication method. Yeah, this is a great one. We definitely hear that a lot. I feel like every webinar that we do, like that stakeholder matrix, it's certainly a great tool and framework for many of us, right, to use to understand what channels to use with specific people. Found a stakeholder community. Oh yes, I love that, right? So that's what the way it comes across to me, stakeholder community, it's potentially bring that a little bit more transparency, right? When you bring people together and unite them, perhaps there is one vision or one goal that unites them. Great answer. Put them all together in the room. Also, yes, absolutely. I feel like in the past, either digitally or even physically, just getting all those opposing perspectives and opinions in one room is a great way to bring, again, that transparency and collaboration, to include people, right, in your decision making. Expectation management. Absolutely. So I think it sounds like that stakeholder community to understand the needs. And Bartel answers, make interests transparent and also, again, put them in the same room. Yes, communication, talk about complexities. Yes, great answers. I think they all are summarized on the next slide. And thank you for sharing some of your perspectives. But all of you mentioned, right, increased transparency. It's really just bring people in the same room. Talk with them about complexities, right? Because even talking about complexities, it means sharing a part of you that might not be very clear on something. So it's, you being a little vulnerable. It's you being transparent about what's really happening. And other ways to increase transparency would be to help your stakeholders understand, how do you create a roadmap? How do you make decisions? What are the customer insights that come out? Not all of your stakeholders have direct relationship with customers like sales or support team, right? Some of them are a little bit more removed, like even your executive team, which very well maybe you're one of your stakeholders. The second, and most of you actually mentioned that, is include stakeholders, right? Again, you can bring them in one room, you can bring them in a digital room, you can create a community, you can understand how to include them into that decision-making process, how to help them understand how you make decisions, that all of the tools that you can use. And then the last umbrella theme, how you can reduce the complexity, is really developing accountability, right? Because I mentioned in the beginning that some of the symptoms could be is that you feel like you don't know how the decisions are made. There is no log of previous decisions, but stakeholders also might feel like they don't know who to go to. So because of that, they go to everyone. They have a question, they go to product manager. This needs a feature, they go to product management or developers. So they, it's unclear really who owns what. So developing accountability is really, after you gather people, after you include them in the process, is to perhaps, build something like understand who is the driver of the process, who is the accountable person, who is the contributor, and who you just need to kind of monitor or keep informed. So really building the accountability so everyone knows where do they go to receive your latest updates, what documents to do to provide input is very clear and straightforward. And with that, Daniil, would you like to cover the next complexity?
Yes, thank you for leading us through the stakeholder part. I think it's one of the most popular one and the most tricky one with other people. Knowledge complexity is less tricky, but requires more time, and it's a little bit more like meticulous because it's about information and not so much about people. And it's so interesting about complexities that, first of all, you don't need to be a product manager to solve them and to reduce them, or a product leader. You can also do it as a tech lead. You can also face the same complexities in marketing, for example, and they also have a lot of knowledge that is lost and not documented, and you can also reduce it. So you can apply and transpose this framework to basically any digital profession. So when we talk about the knowledge complexity, usually you feel it that the knowledge is hidden in the brains of people, and the only way to acquire this knowledge and do the brain dump is to actually by talking with other people, because there is no documentation. And when you make certain decisions, there are no logs and nobody knows why those decisions have been made. And if you have any product documentation or anything, it's okay, there is a question, but I'm not going to read it. I'll keep talking about this slide first. So we have the knowledge that is, for example, people make decisions, but nobody understands how those decisions were made and why those decisions were made the way they were made. And if you need to onboard a new person, like they cannot just understand how the product works or how big the product is they need to talk to people. That's also a sign that you have a knowledge complexity. And whenever customers need any help, they reach out to support, and then support reaches out directly to you or to the developers. And that's also a sign that there's some kind of like everything that ends up being a discussion when it should be a search or a document or an FAQ is probably a good indicator of a knowledge complexity. Because of that, you can also observe that the quality of the service of the product itself is usually quite low because it's not optimized, and the results of the product might be quite weak, and things just kind of work or don't work, and it might feel pretty random, but it's more focused not on the stakeholders, let's say, and who makes decisions, but rather on the knowledge part, on the information part of that. And of course, yeah, as I said, onboarding a new team member will be a hell, because you just need to talk to 20 people and get everything into your head, and only then you have a full picture. Like there is no full picture, it's distributed between people. So that's a clear sign of knowledge complexity. And I'm pretty much sure that you have recognized this complexity or some part of it. It doesn't have to be crazy bad, but it probably is present to some extent in many different teams. And it's especially popular in teams that are quite old. As they accumulate a lot of knowledge and information, that becomes a bigger problem. If the team is just small and starting recently, that's okay. Usually things like you don't need to do a lot of documentation. So that's a popular complexity. And just like before, we would like to ask you, the group, how would you reduce this knowledge complexity? What would be your actions or steps to make things a little bit better for everyone? Okay, we have some answers. Hire a person, product knowledge manager. Well, if you have the budget and you can do that, more people sometimes is the answer. Then there is keywords, let's say visualize, simplify, aggregate, document. So, all right, work with that. Build up FAQ for every repeated question. That's actually an interesting technique. I use it once, and whenever I received a Slack message from anyone with a question, I would never reply directly. I would go to the page on the wiki that we have internally and type in the question and then send the link. And for the second time, when I got the same question, I was just saying, hey, we have a link for that. And I don't need to type it twice, which was a little bit of like time investment in the beginning, but in the end helped me to build up a nice mini wiki for our product space over the course of maybe 2 or 3 months. And it paid off itself. Then I was facing with a different problem that I need to keep it up to date, because once you write something and things change over time, the knowledge gets outdated, and it's a constant effort to keep everything up to date. So that's hard. Let people teach each other. All right. Create some kind of space or dynamic when people can share the knowledge. Not sure what the knowledge skill matrix is, Andres. So if you could expand a little bit on that, that would be super helpful. And Annika suggests to use more of a storytelling. Nice. As I said, and Katya said before, all of those things might work. It really depends on your setup. From our side, we have learned that 3 pillars or 3 drivers help you reduce the complexity faster than others. And the first one, no surprises, is to level up your documentation. When it comes to meeting notes, decisions, product wiki, FAQ, success center, all of that should be documented and should be outside of people's heads and somewhere, ideally with cross-linking, with nice visual representation, so that people can get answers without talking to other people. And especially with remote, when maybe it's a little bit more difficult to connect with other people, having async processes is much easier. The second big improvement that you can do is to turn your knowledge into specific process, because if you have information, it's already good, even if it's documented, but just having information is not enough. You should use this information for something. And usually you use information to make decisions. So if you encounter the same information or you make the same decisions over time, it's really good to turn it into a specific process so that your knowledge becomes actionable. And because you have learned something, because you have generated an insight or you have something, you will make a certain decision. So the knowledge itself should become a process, how you document it, how you capture it, how you use it to make decisions, and how you update it. And just having information is not good, because it will be outdated quite fast. So there should be a process of like transforming this information into specific decisions and outcomes for the company, for prioritization, for communication, for planning. All of those things will use your knowledge and information. And of course, the last part is to increase the transparency, because it's great to have a database, but if nobody knows about it or nobody is using it, that doesn't really help. And this transparency about the knowledge should be constantly communicated in different formats, in your slide decks, on pinned messages on Slack, in your maybe profile. Whenever you send an update or an email, have a short link and say, hey, we have a lot of stuff here. And maybe if people ping you, don't give them the answer. Don't make their life too easy. Just say that we have a database. Please check it there. I remember we have an answer there. So make sure they learn how to use your database. It requires a skill and a little muscle to go somewhere and do the work and Google stuff internally. And people don't like to do that. They want easy and quick answers from people. That's much easier to do. And of course, they don't want to go and like Google themselves something in the wiki and go through 15 pages until they can find the answer and understand the structure. But still, try to make them do this effort, because over time, they will get fluent with your knowledge system, and it will simplify life for them and for you as well. And it's going to be a win-win for everyone and for the rest of the company too. So you can increase the transparency through different things, like during onboarding, during your presentations and communications. Like all of those are good ways of making sure that people are aware that you have the knowledge. And of course, once they come back to you, say like, I can't find anything, it's like structured like shit, you can of course take it as a feedback and improve it over time to make sure that next version is a little bit better than what you have right now. So listen to them as well, but they have to use it before they can actually like give you feedback, and otherwise it will not really work. So that was the knowledge complexity, and we have one more left for the overview today, which is a team complexity. And Katya, would you like to tell us everything about the team complexity?
Sure. So for the team, I'll give you a few examples on how that might feel when you have a team complexity. So the symptoms to watch out for, and again, you don't really, from this perspective, you don't really need to be a product manager. Again, if you are working as a part of the product team today in your capacity, or you're maybe part of the R&D team, you might already feel those, and you can actually even partner up with your product manager or product leader in a company to help resolve that. But team complexity is very common. It takes, while stakeholder might take kind of quicker or faster time to resolve or to reduce, or you might see impact immediately. With the team complexity, the impact takes usually at least a few months. Why? Because because team complexity is really all about culture. It's all about the team that you currently have. It could be your immediate peers, but it could also be a broader R&D team that includes engineers, designers, researchers, coaches, project managers, and product folks. But what you might feel when there is the team complexity is that there is really a lack of ownership, right? So every time there is a problem, people don't know who to go to. It feels like, I think Andrea mentioned that, the blaming game. The blaming game is pretty common when you have a team complexity. And it, again, might mean that you have a poor ownership, or ownership is not defined into who is responsible for what in that big R&D team or smaller product team. It also might come from the lack of vision or strategy. This is a pure domain of product management. And I've seen it in the past when, again, even in pandemic 2020, when the company was working for, we were changing the direction and the vision started changing because the strategy or the direction where we wanted to go because of the shift to digital, to all remote, was so pronounced and obvious. And the impact on the team was such that the team started feeling very disempowered, feeling very uncertain about times, because the new strategy hasn't evolved yet, and because the vision became, for some reason, a moving target instead of having something much more concrete, and just one for the entire team instead of multiple for several teams. That's actually a symptom on its own when every product team feels like they need to have their own product vision. I've dealt with that personally, and sometimes actually at some point I fell into that trap where I feel like, well, my product team is working with what seems like a very separate product area. Why don't we develop product vision just for our area, without recognizing how important it is to have one unified vision, and how enough it is really if you have something much more concrete, everyone gets aligned behind that. You might also feel that while your team members are disempowered, there is more critical, kind of more of a sarcastic or passive aggressive feeling. People also might feel like they have to wear too many hats to fill in the gaps. So let's say if there is a lack of people on the team, product managers, or even you might end up doing something that wasn't in your job responsibility in the beginning. You might start doing testing, you might start doing research, which means that your core job responsibility might not have enough time to be worked on, and you might not have that much of an impact because now you spread very thinly. Another very common symptom that I see actually quite a lot with teams that I work with, but also with the clients, is that people start feeling like you feel like you can't take a day off, or you can't take a holiday, and then when you do, the few days really, really stressful because you're trying to consume things into one document to document before you leave, or into this one day, or have some kind of a knowledge sharing. So it doesn't feel good to just leave even on the holiday. There is also a sense of keeping information instead of freely sharing it. And it's very common when the company grows, when you start moving from this like a core small startup into hyper growth, you have more people coming in, that core original group might feel very protective towards their knowledge for different reasons. Not bad, there's no bad intention really. It's usually because, again, just different reasons for that, but you might feel that. So encouraging people just to share more information or creating an environment where information can be shared and can be kind of celebrated is a really good way to look at this from this perspective. Also, you might feel like there's more than usual external or internal dependencies. Let's say one of your product teams wants to launch a specific feature because it drives this customer outcome. Now they depend on the API that hasn't been developed yet. Or maybe you need REST API, but the API that currently exists is of the old format. So now you cannot move forward until the other team addresses that need, but that team already has different priorities and your priority is not on their list. So that's something that needs to be resolved for the team to move smoothly forward together. And also, just feeling like there is no accountability, releases are getting pushed for no reasons. Maybe there is no even retros to understand why the launch has been delayed for a month. What was really happening? How do we prevent this in the future? How do we learn from this misfortune or mistake? And you also might feel that people are driven by very different motivations on the team because one person feels like, oh, this is the strategy, I'm going to follow this. Other people feel like, oh, I'm just here to collect money. Someone else feel like, oh, this is the only thing that I have, and I'd rather put all of my being and into this work. So kind of different motivations and very random. And before I move forward to kind of give you those 3 umbrellas or 3 themes for how to address it, same question again, how would you reduce people complexity on your team? And maybe you've done it in the past in your current capacity. Maybe you've seen some good product leaders doing that, or just product managers to resolve that. What would you do to reduce that people complexity? Okay, and then we have some answers coming in. So Andrea says split team by product perspective, right? So this is a good one, right? So that's in a way to reduce that random motivation, but also the idea that sometimes random people might belong to your product team, separating by the product perspective, and whatever, you can use whatever framework. I know some people use jobs to be done, others are using more like really product area. There is maybe back end and front end. Some companies are really splitting it by the customer outcome or experience that they're trying to create. Manuela says, clarify roles and responsibilities. Yes, this is actually one of my favorites. And what we've done in the past at 15.5, the company where I worked a couple of years ago, is really have people to define their own roles and responsibilities first before even sharing that freely, right? Because sure, we all have join a company based on some job description, but it's really sometimes vague, and we end up doing something that we're not supposed to do. So that's actually pretty important. Build trust, deliver frequently. Right, building trust is super important, right? That psychological safety. There was a wonderful Google study done, I think, in 2016 that where the results showed that teams that show the signs of psychological safety and trust in the team tend to perform much higher than any other team, because they can freely and transparently talk about their mistakes, their failures. There is no judgment in the team. They can address those mistakes, they can learn, and they can collectively get better. So I love the point that you brought up about building trust. Around PM, share out sessions. Around PM, so as I understand, and Christoph, if you actually want to step in and share with us a little bit more, but from what I understand, it's having product managers sharing something about themselves, or sharing something about the product. Well, that's a drastic one. Sure, that could also be an answer, right, Daniil? I mean, I think we've seen it, and it doesn't mean that it's going to lead to better outcomes, but it will change something, hopefully for better. Agree on working rules, right? So this is kind of your ways of working, right? So how do you work as a team? Who does what? Thank you for adding more details, Christoph. So what you meant by those PM share out is sharing best practices, sharing knowledge, solving common issues together, right? So maybe some kind of a jam session, right? Like jazz musicians have their jam together where they learn from each other. That's actually a very great practice for not just product managers. Thank you for great answers. And I think all of your, these great answers can actually go under those three themes that you could use to reduce team complexity. So you could align on all goals and vision, right? So this is really creating one clear strategy and one product vision for the entire company so that all the team members, no matter their function, product manager, project manager, engineer, designer, research, they understand what are you doing and why you're doing and what would that entail to get there. Upgrading your processes, right? So a few of you mentioned sharing best practices, sharing knowledge, figuring out the ways of working, defining roles and responsibilities. Those are all processes. You can also focus as a product manager on defining or introducing new frameworks, new practices, new paradigms that would help your team to work better. And then the final one is rebuilding team culture. It takes the longest time, probably, really, but the impact is significant. And if you do all the right things, if you approach patiently this topic, your product team culture will really thrive. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, maybe not even a month, but doing something like celebrating wins at the end of the week, sharing the best practices, connecting one-on-one with people, doing the retros, having maybe introducing the onboarding buddy system to help new people who just joined to the team feel very safe and secure and know where to go for if they need information. That all builds culture. But of course, it still needs to start with a clear vision and the goals, knowing how you work. And after that, culture can, in a way, start living on its own because you already built the foundation of your house, of your team culture. And with that, we mentioned that there is more and more complexities, but we're not going to cover them today. But just because we really delve into those three, it doesn't mean that none of others don't exist. There is delivery, pure execution. There is a scope, and scope just really starts growing out of your container they originally formed. There is merger and acquisition. There is a split of the company. There is a lot of things that can happen on the business side that would eventually introduce more complexities that you haven't dealt in the past with. But just understanding how those three work, you already can start applying principles, looking for the symptoms, understanding what good questions to ask to validate some of those symptoms and hypotheses, understanding maybe who to align to, and then actually applying solutions or brainstorming ideas how to solve that. Just understanding that approach can help you tackle any other complexity that comes your way in your career. And with that, we're moving into three takeaways. So just to close off those three complexities in our complexities framework, what we would like you to leave with, again, either your product manager or someone who considers to move into product leadership, or you just want to understand what leadership is and how to gain some of those necessary skills. Our recommendation is, first of all, don't wait for a title. We really hope that understanding the complexities, introducing you to a mindset where you don't have to wait until you become, until you start leading people to be called a leader. You can be a leader today. Seeing a problem and solving a problem on a bigger scale, on a scale of kind of this above the water landscape, already puts you in the leadership shoes, because leadership starts really just with you. The next step is identify complexity. You're probably lucky to work in a company if you have no complexities, but I've never met a team or a company that has none of them. Or if you can, it means you might want to dig deeper. You might want to ask more questions, not just from yourself, but your team members. So focus on identifying one impactful complexity that might help you, your team, your company and of course your own career to move forward. And then the final, really get support, right? Because we're social beings. We never can do big impact on our own. We really need a village. We need partners. We need to align with people who support our vision, who see why we're doing things, and who can align with us in the different areas, in the areas of their competency, to help us create the change, to transform the organization, because the change is hard, no matter what you do with that. And with that, what we've showed to you is just really a tip of an iceberg. Those three complexities. There is so much more that's under the water, and literally and figuratively. And as I mentioned, the change is hard. It's really difficult to understand, what changes to apply, in which order, who needs to lead them, who do I need to align with, to really understand what to do with that. And that was one of the reasons we created our product leadership course. As we mentioned in the beginning, this framework is a big part of that. And we just showed you kind of the tip of that. But our product leadership course, next slide, Daniil, please, is really all about for you to understand what leadership is. Why do you want to go to leadership? Because for some folks, it's just not the path, and understanding that can be very empowering and can be very opening, because you don't have to be, you have to go for a leadership title to be a leader, but you also don't have to be in that leadership position if you really enjoy just rolling up the sleeves and doing work. There is always an individual contributor path for any of the roles or functions in the tech world in R&D team. So really, it's all about you reflecting on, why do you want to be a leader? So we do a lot in our program just to bring that self-awareness to understand, why do you need to be one? What does it mean for you? To understand your motivations. And then we really deep dive in, we're doing a deep dive into the leadership complexities, and really extending the framework to understand how to actually apply it on a daily basis, right? Because frameworks are great. They can, you can take them as they are, but you can also, adjust them. The framework is a very flexible thing. That's why it's a framework. So we extended it for you to see how to break it apart and how to apply day by day, week by week, to make progress when you lead in this big project that involves reducing the complexity. And then we talk about how to actually deal with each complexity as you choose one, and as you start in a practical way driving the big change and transformation in the organization. We support you. There is a lot of conversations and exploration that goes, a lot of support and coaching in the group setting. And it's all about really guiding you through from where you are today to where you want to be, into those leadership shoes, and having good career conversations with your manager in between all of that, all the way to where you feel like you're ready to be promoted, or you have some evidence of all the work that you've done. And as Daniil mentioned, we have a next cohort starts in summer 22. So if you apply, you can visit our website. It's headofproduct.com. We would love to hear from you if you're interested just to talk with us or to understand a little bit more. Send us a message, submit your application. It really requires a couple of minutes with a few questions in there. And with that, I'm gonna pause. And Daniil, would you like to take the last slide, share with the team?
So please raise your hand, unmute yourself, ask a question. Anything goes. You can also type it in the chat, that also works.
Daniil, is there any questions left open from the chat? Questions that you respond?
Katerina, I didn't hear you well. Maybe it's the mic, or it feels like you were too far away.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That was my mic, yes. I remember that we had some questions in the chat that you postponed for that moment. Maybe if there is still something open there, we can start with those questions.
Yeah, a good idea. So scrolling up, there was a question from Andre. And Andre, if you're with us, would you like to unmute yourself and ask it in person, maybe? I actually don't see Andre.
I think Andre already left, Daniil.
All right, then let's skip to the next question. That was from Annika in the chat. And is a product leader a chief product officer and a PM a product owner? So in different companies, you have different roles and titles and namings, and it's not that easy to give a definitive answer. But usually I say that in the product contributor level, you have junior, mid-level, and a senior, and you can say it's a PM or PO. All of them work. Like junior product owner or product owner, same for product manager. And when you go into leadership, you usually have a different title, and you have head of product, group product manager, lead PM, principal PM, director of product management, VP of product management, CPO, and like all of them are leadership roles. But I like to think about it in the same structure, that as a product leader, you also have 3 steps. You have a junior product leader, mid-level product leader, and a senior product leader. And in different companies, each level is represented and called differently. So in one company, junior product leader could be head of product, and another could be director of product. But in reality, that's a junior level of leadership, because the person can deal maybe with 1 or 2 complexities only in a well-defined space. And a senior leader would be a person who can deal with 5 or 6 complexities of very entangled. And as you have noticed probably, those complexities, they overlap sometimes. And when you have one problem, it increases the complexity in the stakeholder side and also on the team side, and they're connected. So very senior people and the product leaders, they usually can handle multiple complexities that are connected to each other, and they have a lot of dimensions, and that comes only with experience and seeing many different situations and navigating them. So it's not about the title, it's probably about how many complexities you can handle. And remember that leadership is also starting that you go to the leadership and then you develop from this beginning. You become a junior leader first, and then mid-level, and a senior leader in the end of as you go in your career.
Daniil, Andre just joined us again.
Oh, Andre, welcome back.
So, Andre, would you like to shoot your question, which you just which you typed into the chat earlier?
Oh yeah. So it is my internet. I don't know why, but yeah. So thank you for the chance. So I have my personal experience, and it is it is not all of it have a deadline, but the highest priority, which is like the most, if it failed, then the company will fail, something like that. So it is the most highest priority, and usually it is deadline driven. I don't know why, but in my company it is like that. I mean, is it like normal or not? I don't know, but my company is like that. And then usually the business people, like the accountability of the product manager in there is at stake, right? With the business people, because if they said like, okay, we will deliver something like that in the future, but it is missed by a lot, and somehow his credibility will be attacked, right? Something like that. So how I see it, like, is it common problem or not? There is it need to be like that, or it just my company and my own experience of it? The question is something like that.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. So in my experience, I in 10 plus years, I haven't had experience of shipping something completely on time. There was always a little bit of a delay. And it happens for different reasons. So it sounds like what you described is that there is an accountability, but it's mostly about the deadlines and the timelines and things like that, which is sure, this is kind of the basic, not the basic, but the foundation of accountability is that, like, who delivers what and when, right? And then if it's not met, what do we do about it? My question was for you. So have you had any assessments or evaluations or retros to understand why the delays are happening and how to prevent them in the future?
I think it's already have. But usually the problem is too many. It's like a snowballing effect.
Okay, so it sounds like the problem is, yeah, and it's how complexity grows, right? So with the time it does become a big snowball. So did you have a chance to deconstruct that? Just like take the snowball, right? Take the different problems that make up this big set of problems and try to address them one by one. Did you have any experience with that?
Yeah. Like a basic thing, like a changing requirement in the middle of the sprint, it should not be a major thing to this, but it's happening and causing much trouble. But it's a lot. It's just like I can pick only 1, 2, 3. I know there are a lot, like why the decision is making the decision. The making of the decision itself is, I think, is problematic too.
Yeah, so what I would recommend for your next steps, try to do a retro, try taking one problem and try maybe with reducing the knowledge complexity in a way, or team complexity, by maybe creating the ways of working, right? So if the problem is to introducing new requirements mid-sprint, maybe that's a part of the process, reimagining the way you actually work, reimagining who is responsible for what in the process, and creating really clear deadlines for each team, and holding them to those, right? Instead of kind of after that snowballing and dealing with the final outcome. So I hope that helps, but it certainly is a problem at every company that I've been. You're not alone on this.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So are there any more questions towards Daniil and Katja?
Well, if no questions, then here's our links and emails. You can also see them in the chat. Send us a message, connect with us. We're always happy to get in touch with other product and non-product people, because we all participate in building innovation, and that's what matters. You can also visit the website and learn a little bit more about the course and the program. And it's been great to have you with us. So I don't know, Sophie, Mukader, any closing thoughts from your side?
Yeah, well, thank you, Katja and Daniil, for the really interesting talk tonight. It was a pleasure to have you here at B-DoSE.